welcome to this week's Crafternoons. For this week's craft, we're going to be doing a nature-themed project. The first thing you're going to want to do is collect some items to take rubbings of. So for mine, I'm going to be doing leaves. And as you can see right here, this is just the test one that I did. So what we're going to be doing is taking leaf rubbings to get surface textures onto paper. So obviously the first thing you're going to want to do is collect your leaves. It can be at your house, it can be at the park, or your favorite tree. And this is a project that you can do either in the summertime or in the fall as well, because you can adapt the colors to be orange, red, yellow, really any type of color that you see in the fall. But for this project, since it's summer, I'm going to be using green. So once you have collected your leaves, like the ones I have here, what you're going to do is take a look at the leaf, and you're going to want to do the texture on the side that's kind of got the vein a little bit more prominent. So this thing that runs right up the center of the leaf. This is going to give you a little bit more visibility when you go to do the rubbing. You can also use this side. It's a little bit more subtle, but I like to use the side where you can definitely feel the texture. So this is the other leaf I have, and you can kind of see the veins that run through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my leaf down on a surface. I take my paper, set it on top, and for this craft you can also use a colored pencil or crayons, whatever one you've got available. And for the crayons, if you're working with someone who has smaller fingers, I recommend kind of peeling back a little bit of the paper on your crayons and going like this from side to side. It's a little bit easier to handle. For mine, I'm going to be using a colored pencil. So I'm going to kind of hold the leaf and the paper down at the bottom here, and you're going to kind of go a little bit of a 45-degree angle and then just go back and forth like this. It's a little faint right now, so I'll give you a close-up of it once I finish doing the rubbing. You kind of see that line starting to come through. This is kind of a cool science project as well, because you can write underneath each leaf where it was found, what type of leaf it is, and you'll need to do just a little bit of research to kind of figure out what your leaves are that you've collected. And you don't really have to worry about perfect edges on this. And that's kind of part of the fun, is that the leaves are almost appearing on the paper as we're doing the rubbing. I'm going to go on this side now. There we go. And if you press down a little bit harder, your lines do become a little bit darker. And I'll show you a close-up of the leaf that I have so far. So I'm going to take this from the back, kind of show you a little bit. You can kind of see this line running here, and then the kind of veins of the leaf running that direction. And again, I'll show you a close-up of what that looks like as well. Kind of see the texture coming through. So that's my first leaf. So I'm going to take my second one, and this is where you get to kind of talk about composition, placement of objects in the space or the piece of paper that you're working with. So I could do it like this, where I lay them next to each other, kind of neat and clean. And then I could write what type of leaf I have under each one. But for mine, I think I'm going to do it a little more of a kind of abstract composition. So I'm going to tilt my leaf this direction so it's right up next to here. So I'm making more of a picture than a field guide. And it's okay if they overlap as well. You can even get some kind of neat textures that way too. I'm going to go with this. Kind of start to see that middle vein starting to come through. Kind of see the edge right here. I'm going to do a little bit of overlap And I'll give you a close-up of the overlap as well. A little more in this area right down in there. Okay, so it looks like I got a little more space. My leaf is a little bigger than I originally thought. And that's okay, we're kind of... There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take my leaf out from under here, and I'm going to add a new one right in here. And this one had a little more texture than the first one did, and I'll let you see a close-up of that. Kind of see the veins running that direction. So then I'm going to flip my piece of paper, because I want another texture right here. And for this one, I'm going to use the dark green crayon instead of the colored pencil, so I can show you kind of the technique that I'm using for that one. Kind of hold your paper down, because you don't want that leaf to shift underneath. Apply just a little bit of pressure. You want enough pressure so you can see the leaf, but not too much that it rips while you're doing this. And you can use really any type of crayon or pencil that you're comfortable with using. If you're working with a small child for this craft, I usually recommend crayons because they're a little bit easier to handle, and there's less chance that the paper will rip when you're using it. And I'll show you a close-up of what I've got so far. You can kind of see my leaves now. And the other kind of cool thing that you can do with this as well is it doesn't have to stay just one color. So I'm going to take this lighter greenish yellow. I'm going to just color in real quick my leaf. Okay, my picture is going to be what's called monochrome or monochromatic. It's where you have a picture completely made of one color, but different shades or tones of that color. Okay, so now you can kind of see the outline of my leaf a little bit better. And speaking of outlines, now I can take my colored pencil and kind of draw the outline, darken it up just a little bit, and it's okay if it's not perfect. Kind of doing a little bit of tracing here. This is also a very fun craft to do in the fall, especially when the leaves are changing color, because then you can use the colors to match the leaves that you've collected. Go, go. Okay, so there's my first finished leaf. So I'm going to go back to these ones, and I'm going to kind of fill in this leaf just like I did with this one. I'm just going to color where I think the leaf is, just kind of following the edge. Just like that. And like I mentioned earlier, you can also do this with really any type of object that has a texture. You can do this on the sidewalk, you can do this on any type of like concrete. You'll get kind of a speckly type of texture. And that's the other neat thing you can do once you learn this technique, is you can apply it to a bunch of different things. Alright, so now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw an outline of my new leaf. This one's going to be a little bit trickier because you can kind of see I've got some details along the edge, but I don't have to like make any of those details up because when I did the rubbing, those came through on the paper. I'm just going to kind of do like a little zigzag here and there. And I'm going to take this side and kind of do the same thing. And we're kind of creating a record of the leaves in our yards or in our favorite park. or if you go on vacation in a lot of woods. So there's that leaf. So now I have this one, and this one's pretty faint, so this one's going to be a little bit trickier to outline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of estimate where it is. I'm just going to start coloring. Looks like it's right up in here, and then I can kind of base it off this one because they're the same leaf. Looks like it stops right about there. Keep going. And that looks pretty good for me. I'm happy with that. I don't think it needs too much more. Maybe a tiny bit up in the corner there. Okay, so now I'm going to take, not quite that one, it's a little bit too big. I'm going to take this one with the sharper edge, and I'm just going to draw in the stem and the veins of the leaf, like so. Okay, and then I'm just going to trace what I think is the edge of the leaf. Where I think the edge is, at least. There we go. Now we've got our 3 leaves. So I'm just going to do a quick comparison and see how close I got to the original. Not too bad. This one's probably pretty close. Yep. I'm going to take this last one and just do a quick comparison. It looks like this one will go something like there. So I do like how this turned out. Usually if you use a darker color like this dark green and do the rubbing first, kind of get the nice lines, and then you can go in with a lighter color like this yellow and go over the top. I generally recommend using the darker color first on something like this, and then going in with a lighter color to fill in the extra space. Now I'm going to add a little bit of this dark green between the pieces of the leaf. Just going to color that in. Give it a little bit of contrast. Or you can leave that edge too. Totally up to you. We're kind of like explorers figuring out the landscape a little bit. There we go. This is also kind of a neat project if you're creating drawings that you need something that looks very realistic. And keep going. And I'll give you a close-up view of what this actually looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that. Kind of show you real close what this texture is. You can kind of see even the little tiny veins that branch out from this, which is pretty neat. You can see them all right there too. And we created all of that just by rubbing the leaf under our paper. We get this really neat impression of the leaves. And the nice part is about this is you can see the leaf is pretty much still intact, so there isn't a whole lot of damage that happens to it with the rubbing. They will kind of degrade a little bit the more rubbings that you do, so you'll want to get new leaves. And I'll show you real quick just how I use this if you're doing another method for rubbing. So I'm going to take this, well actually I like this leaf a little bit better, so we're going to do this one. I'm going to put it in the bottom corner here, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to pinch it kind of at the top and then just rub. And this is going to give me a lighter impression. And you can definitely try this too. And I'll show you a close-up of this one as well. There we go. So this is a slightly lighter technique when you do the rubbing. Whereas what I was kind of doing before is holding it at like a 45-degree angle from the page and then rubbing that direction. But again, I recommend kind of pinching it from the side and rubbing like this if you've got smaller hands, or if you're working with someone who has smaller hands. A little bit easier to handle. And then I'm just going to draw a quick outline on this new one that I just did. Bottom corner one. And it is a little bit lighter in color than the other one since I used a lighter crayon. So I'm going to try putting in just a tiny bit of the yellow, just to add a little bit of color to it. And it's okay if you've got colors that overlap. It's kind of an interesting element that adds depth to your picture. There we go. So now, got my leaves. You can kind of see, put them side by side, how close they are. And that is how you do a leaf rubbing. I'm going to show you what I did before I colored them in. This is just kind of if you're just doing the rubbing, and this one is if you're doing the coloring too. And that's this week's Crafternoons. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next week with more fun projects. We'll see you later.